Challenges are fuel for growth. You know this, brother. Fuel for growth, not just in our personal lives, but especially in our work lives. If we're not in an environment where peers are not allowed, but they are must challenge other peers, then we are settling for mediocrity. And it's not enough for one person, the boss, to be the only person to allow and be allowed to challenge others. The math doesn't work. It's one versus many. If we're going to be excellent, that means all of us have to contribute.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Best You interview series. It's Gary here. Again, thank you very, very much for taking the time to join me. And today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by author, speaker and leadership expert Kyle McDowell, who is here to discuss his 10 W's structure that helps people and organizations build and sustain excellence. For nearly 3 decades, Kyle has led tens of thousands of employees and managed multi-billion-dollar P&Ls inside some of corporate America's largest firms. But at the height of his career, he hit a wall, and we're definitely going to be talking about that today. And despite the success, Kyle was overwhelmed with apathy and was simply going through the motions. The drive to make an impact, which was the very thing that once fueled him, was basically gone. That moment became the turning point and led to an epiphany that changed his life. Determined to rediscover purpose and build a better way to lead, Kyle created his 10 W's, which is a principle-based framework that became the foundation for his Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller, Begin with We, 10 Principles for Building and Sustaining a Culture of Excellence. Today, Kyle helps organizations bring those principles to life, transforming cultures from transactional to transformational. He doesn't teach theory, he shares hard-learned or hard-earned lessons from 3 decades in the trenches with practical tools that turn bosses into authentic leaders and values into repeatable behavior. I just absolutely love that sentiment, and I cannot wait for this conversation. Kyle, thank you very, very much for joining me today.
Hey, Garrett, man, it's great to see you again. Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm absolutely delighted. I really have been looking forward to this one.
Cool.
You know, the typical process I follow is that I have a pre-interview with our prospective interviewees so that we can see if there's going to be a gel or a flow. And as soon as Kyle and I got on the very first call, it was like 2 firm friends who hadn't seen each other for maybe a day or so, and it was such a great connection and such a powerful story. So as I like to do at the beginning, Kyle, is to give the audience a wee bit of an overview of who you are. And I mentioned that wee bit there that you were having, if I could say, this is my words, not anyone else's words, a traditional career. You're having success in the career. There's likely progression in that. And then you get to that point where, as I mentioned, you hit the wall. And then you have this journey that then takes you to where you're at right now. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, I think you really framed it well, Gary. I entered the corporate world no different than I think every single other person on the planet who's ever had a job. And that was with a lot of optimism and eagerness. I wanted to make an impact, wanted to find fulfillment. I wanted to make good money. I think all of those are characteristics that we bring into the workplace, or at least we flirt with it at one point or another in our career. And my first job in big corporate America was right out of high school. I was just 18 years old, ended up paying my way through my undergrad with that job. And I managed to just kind of climb the corporate ladder over the course of the next 30 years. And you mentioned it, but before I left to write my book and kind of take on a new challenge, I was leading tens of thousands of people around the globe for some really, really big firms. And, you say the way you frame it was I hit a wall, and that is true. In hindsight, it was more of a slow burn. It was with each promotion, with each new opportunity, with each new kind of ego-driven success criteria that I created for myself, the only thing that matched those kind of vanity metrics, the fancy titles, the cool corner offices, the big salaries, the only thing that matched that for me was my level of apathy. And, I got to say, it's a hell of a gut punch to wake up and loathe going into the environments that you created, that you were responsible for creating and maintaining. And that's ultimately what the leader's role is. And I just got to this point where the apathy was so strong. I just started to ask a whole lot of questions. Like, is this how everybody experiences their work life? And, I learned this many, many years ago, and it's never left me. We all work on average, give or take, anywhere between 90 and 110,000 hours during our time on this planet. And when I learned that, it just it was like a wet blanket thrown on me. It's like, dude, if you're going to spend that much time doing this one thing, and by the way, the only thing you'll do even close to that on this earth is sleep. So your sleep is the number one activity you'll do while you're here. Right behind that is work. So I just came to this conclusion that there had to be a better way. There had to be a better way to lead, a way to find fulfillment, all the things that we brought to the workplace when we first entered it. I didn't know what that meant, but I recognized that where I was in my life at that point, and my career was dominating my life. My work consumed me. It was my identity, which led to a divorce, led to not great health. I wasn't a very happy person, wasn't a fun person to be around. So I went really deep inside, did a lot of self-reflection and started to ask myself some tough questions. And the one question that remained at the end of all of those was, is there a better way? And that's what compelled me to create the principles that you referenced and write my book and do what I do now.
It's so interesting in terms of, having a purpose-driven mission and knowing and understanding that. I say that from a respect that at the time of recording, my son is just about 17, and we are looking at university options for him for next year, and he's kind of charting his path, and it's a bit of a tough. Is it tough? Is that the right word? It's a bit of a nuanced conversation that we're having because he doesn't have a single particular passion. He's not really consumed by the type of style of work that I do, and he's looking to genuinely add value, create impact, have purpose, move forward with intention and integrity. He's just kind of doing his thing and saying, right, I do want to go to university. Him, myself, and his mum have said, you're going to university, you take whatever topic you want to take. I just want you to learn how to learn.
Yeah.
And, in a post-secondary type style of environment where you get to choose, most of what it is you're learning. But the reason I think is really interesting, Kyle, is that I take myself back to when I entered the workforce, and it was just, you just need to get a job, man.
Right.
That's it. So my parents they were just kind of like, don't be an arsehole and get a job. That's, I'm kind of like, well, I'll try, so I got a job and we leave school back home at 16. So I just turned 16 December, got a job.
Gary, can I jump in right there?
Definitely.
You said you got a job after they urged you, but were you an asshole after they urged you?
Absolutely not, obviously. I'm surprised you even asked that question.
Yeah, I just had to challenge you there for a moment, man.
Yeah, well, I guess it's all subject to interpretation, I suppose. Some people you would ask would say,
great answer.
Yeah. But so I got this job as a painter, like a house painter, industrial painter, that sort of thing. And then at the time, I kind of remember like a cam coming over my parents where they just went, check. He's got a job. He's going to be fine. He's got a good work ethic. I had a paper run or a paper route, as we say in North America, for 3 years before that. So my work ethic wasn't in question. I did that 364 days a year, and really just I had a strong desire to know and understand that I need to work if I want to get money, and it was really all about that. So there was no genuine clarity. There was no purpose. There was no intention of anything
of what you were going to do the rest of your life, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So then it was just, I've got a job. My apathy, my wall, to bring it back to your story, happened within about 2 weeks of my career. I started as a painter, and then I'm kind of all excited. I'm like, this is kind of cool. I'm going to hang out with some cool guys, and I'm going to get to paint some things, which is kind of fun as well. Yeah. And then within about 2 weeks, I thought, oh no, what have I done? And it was a 4-year apprenticeship. And I didn't try in school. I just did what I did. School was more of a social thing for me rather than a learning thing, which I learned from a social perspective, but not from an academic perspective.
Sure.
So I had absolutely limited my options. So then I had to grind for that 4 years. And it was just, the end in sight was to finish my apprenticeship, to get my journeyman's ticket, and then see where I could go from there. And that's not what I want for Leo, my son. And, that's what I try and encourage all the undergrads that I'm chatting with, when I'm teaching at the U of C and such, is the ability to be able to say, do everything that you're doing, even if you don't like it, at the absolute best and maximum that you can, because you're going to get something from it. And sometimes it's going to be quite unexpected. So I love that you had that purpose and intention and then through your journey, it went away, and then it felt like from your story, Kyle, you were kind of tapping back into it. Would that be fair?
Yeah, man. I went. And again, I don't think this is unusual. When I started to have these thoughts of what are you doing? Like, are you having the impact that you are capable of having? Which I think is, by the way, something I think most of us don't think about often.
Yeah.
But when we do, if you do take the time to ask yourself that question, am I having the impact that I'm capable of having? And if you're honest with yourself and the answer is no, well, the next step is to, what are you going to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
So I had to go through this period of self-reflection. And I don't mean to imply like it was this dark dungeon of like brooding, because it wasn't that, but it was, it was in some ways it even transcends the workplace, Gary, because it's like, if I'm not living up to my capability, if I'm not having the impact that I am capable of having, then the only person on this planet that can change that is me.
Yeah.
And for years as a leader, you know how this works, man. The higher you ascend in any environment, but the corporate world more broadly, the funnier your jokes get, the more people want to spend time with you and get FaceTime with you.
Yeah.
So they start to create this echo chamber of how great you are, which only compels you to perpetuate the same nonsense behavior. In my case, leading with pretty much an iron fist and being, more driven by results than I was by the people that delivered the results. And I should also note that that's the environment in which I was raised in the corporate world. It's just how things were in those days. And the truth is, you can have an effective career, not an impactful one, but you can have an effective career. But I got to this point where I checked all these boxes that I created for myself, and it was like, now what? Like, where has this left me? And I just made this shift. Well, to cut to the chase, I got to this point where I just knew something had to change. I was not in a position where I could just leave work. I mean, I had obligations and bills and commitments. So I told myself, I was very lucky at this point, I was just going to take a few weeks, maybe a month or so away from work. I don't mean to come across naive. I was in a very fortunate position to be able to do that. When I walked away, I made a promise to myself that when I go back into that fray, it has to be an environment that's going to allow me to lead in a way that I had never led before. Again, still not knowing what that meant. It had to be a place where I could be the leader that I never really had. And again, I didn't really know what that meant. And after leaving the role that I was in, about 2 weeks went by, and I got a phone call asking would I be interested in having some conversations that would require me to lead about 15,000 people. It was a $7 billion portfolio. And I sensed early in that interview process that there was an opportunity for me to check those boxes, lead differently, be the leader I never had, just lead in a different way. And I ended up taking that role. And about 60 days into the role, I brought the top 40 or 50 leaders of this massive organization together. And it would be my chance to kind of impart on them what I kind of expected of them in the road ahead. And it was the night before, I'm in my hotel room, and I just started playing scenarios of the previous, this is probably year 22 of my career at that point. I just started to replay scenarios that left me feeling like a means to an end, or that I was easily replaceable, or that my opinions or my input wasn't valued. And I just thought to myself, well, we ain't going to be like that. That's exactly the inner monologue. It's like, well, we ain't going to be like that. And then I thought through other scenarios where bosses made me feel or asked me to do things that I just knew in my gut were probably not right, but I just did them to endear myself to them, because I knew they had an influence on my path, my promotion, my pay. And I just, again, we're not going to do that. And every response to every scenario that I kind of ran through was then juxtaposed by less than a handful of leaders who really inspire me. Those that I could tell there was no ulterior motive. They genuinely wanted to see me grow and develop and take on more. And sometimes there's one fella in particular who saw more in me than I probably still see in myself. And the impact he had on me is immeasurable. And I thought, well, that's who we are. That's who we're going to be. That's how we're going to operate. And this kind of like laundry list of experiences ended up with me telling myself, and then started typing the types of behaviors that would almost guarantee, if not all but guarantee, that if we were to all behave in this way, starting with me, that we would create this culture that would be one that was collaborative, but also one that was not settling on this is how we've always done it. I'm always a hard charger, always want to deliver great results, and I always went after results. I did it the wrong way for many years, and it occurred to me that if we're going to be excellent, and I was really clear to say we're not going to be perfect, we're going to strive for excellence. We're going to create this culture of excellence. And I shared these 10 W's with the team, having no idea what would happen from that point forward. I had no idea it would compel me to write a book that would become a bestseller. But I led that conversation, that part of the conversation, by saying, these are the behaviors I want you to expect from me. And if you see me behave in any way contrary to any one of these behaviors, I want you to grab me by the ear and say I'm being a hypocrite. Just tell me. And that was a massive departure from the way I approached my leadership game for the previous 20 years. And it was a real gamble. It was a gamble that if I were to invest more time and energy into the people that I was surrounded with for this fraction of time that's ultimately going to add up to 100,000 hours, would the results be there? And would people be more invested and be less compliant, but more ownership driven?
Yeah.
And it worked. It worked. And that's not my commentary. For years after I left that organization, there were still the 10 We Awards. The 10 We's are part of annual appraisals and growth kind of conversations with members of teams. And it was that group. So I left that company three and a half years later, took on an even bigger role. And it was my friends from the previous company where the 10 We's were created. I shouldn't say created. I should probably say identified, because there's nothing groundbreaking in any one of them. That was the crew that urged me to write my book. Yeah. And the final bit of commentary on that little chapter, man, that I think is really illustrative of the impact we can have is I still have, I wouldn't call it regularly scheduled, but consistent one-on-ones with members of that team that I haven't worked with now in 8 years, which I think is a real commentary that if you connect with people, the relationship transcends boss and employee and actually becomes much more human and valuable to both sides. And that's what I'm probably proud of most, is the connections I made throughout that whole process. It allows me and it fuels me to continue to do the same thing now.
Yeah, the most powerful part, you talked earlier about the fact that you're, the only person that can control your destiny is you, and your attitude, your behavior, your actions, and your endeavors. And then you took these 10 directives or 10 philosophies or principles, whatever is the best word to use, and you automatically, instantaneously had said, this is for me. If you see me being incongruent with this, you have absolute permission to pull me aside or say it in public, whatever the parameters would be, to make sure that I'm going to live to these, and I anticipate and hope and desire that you do too, because these are the cornerstone of foundations for success. So you were still saying, I think the ability to manifest and manage my life to this is on me, and I'm going to do this. I hope you come along with me. I anticipate that you will, but it's not a guarantee, and that speaks to the gamble that you were talking about. Mm-hmm. How did that messaging come around, and certainly from the first stages or the very early stages?
Yeah, I love how you summarize that, man, because that's exactly how it went. You can call me a lot of things that will just not affect me at all. You can call me the worst words you can think of, except hypocrite. That's a word that just really, really bothers me. And I was very intentional in not making the 10 We's an initiative. I was very intentional not to create signage and have these, hollow motivational quotes associated with them, because I'd been at massive organizations with the sexiest of mission statements and corporate values that were led by people that were frankly very toxic. Yeah. And I didn't want to be connected or associated with that. So I kind of pulled back. But what I did that was, I think, obvious to others is when I found myself or caught myself either living the principles or not, because I'm not perfect at it and I'm still not, and I still err.
Mm.
I would literally say it. It's like, as for example, Gary, if you're on the team and you're not delivering at the level at which we know you're capable of, and why is a different conversation. We can come back to that, but I need to have that awkward or difficult conversation with you. I would start the conversation with, "Hey, Gary, listen, man, we challenge each other, right? And of course, you've already subscribed. You're already a part of this team and to be on this team." And I did close that day. I should add this. I did close that first session, that conversation by saying, if any one of these principles you feel like are not for you, I will help you find another job. And I didn't mean that in a nasty kind of, there was no retribution there. It was just kind of like, I'm serious. I want you to do what's best for you. And if you can't connect with every one of these, then I don't think you're the right fit for where we're heading.
Yeah.
So when that tough conversation happens between you and I, you're still here because you've acknowledged that these are, you can live and model these behaviors as a leader on this team as well. I started by saying we challenge each other, and then we get through the conversation. It's like, all right, Gary, we pick each other up, right, man? So what do you need from me? Mm-hmm. And the more those words, the words within the 10 principles started to weave themselves into my daily vernacular, I started to hear them played back to me. And this was back in the day pre-COVID, where I'm sure you remember this, like geographically dispersed teams, they didn't get on video conferences. We just did, everything was voice, right? Yeah. And in some of those platforms, you didn't have to announce when you joined the call. And I was that leader. I would dial in to a meeting that I was either invited to, but didn't have to speak, or a meeting that I was not invited to. I would dial in because I wanted to see how the team was operating when I was out of the room. I think what we see as leaders is not always what's really happening in the hallways or behind the scenes. So I wanted to watch, I wanted to listen. And I started to hear those words played back to one another. And then I showed up at one of our locations and there was signage on the wall. And, in corporate America, like there's all these approvals. I have to go through all this stuff. I had no idea. I didn't commission it, didn't ask for it. And then as I started to visit our other locations as time went on, each location put their own spin on these principles, created different signage. I walked into work one day, these bracelets were floating around. I've been wearing not the same one, but we challenge each other bracelet for 8-9 years now. So when I pulled back, I gave the team space to step forward. Yeah. But none of that, none of this would have happened or kind of spread the way that it did if they saw me behave one way and be on stage and evangelize something different. It won't work. It's hollow. As a matter of fact, you're worse off than never having done it. And it just took off and took a life of its own that it changed my life. There's no other way to say it. It changed my life because what happened from that point, man, is my maniacal desire to not be called a hypocrite fueled me to recognize that I was not behaving similarly outside of work. I just wasn't the same person because I hadn't developed a set of standards to hold myself accountable to outside of the workplace, which I think is an incredibly important exercise for all of us, because if we don't establish standards, how do we ever achieve them? And there's a hell of a jolt of satisfaction that comes when you hold yourself to something, even when it's hard, even when no one's looking. So that was a kind of a beautiful unintended consequence of all this. It weaved itself into my personal life, which, if as an aside, Gary, you know this, based on our conversations, you know this, if you're able to pair the way you make money, your income, with something that you're incredibly passionate about, you're so much better at it. Because you recognize that it's adding value. And that doesn't necessarily mean monetarily, but my point is, the more I do what I do, the more it fuels me to do what I do, because it's something that I'm passionate about and I see the impact that it's having.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely incredible. So much to unpack there. I love the standards part that you talked about, and not making it just exclusive to one area of your life where you're going to move heaven and earth to really reshape, change, modify, impact, create value for a community that's a worldwide community. And then you go home and you just kind of forget all the good stuff that you're doing. It reminds me of an exercise I did recently where I looked at the various areas of my life where I have direct input or influence on, parenting, being a good partner to my love, being a good sibling, being, a good neighbor, being, a good teammate on the football team that I play on, and the various volunteer roles and such, and the professional part. And to say, like, what do I want to be known for in each of these areas? And then when I looked at it, I did it on a spreadsheet. When I looked at it, where are the common threads? And most of it was common. I want to be dependable. I want to be reliable. I want to be, energetic. I want to bring value. I want people to be enthusiastic about what this looks like, and then there's nuances depending on exactly what it is. And it was just a whim. And I was sitting in my car, actually. I dialed into a meeting talking about being on a meeting, and I was sitting in a parking lot, and I was kind of like, it was nothing to do with the meeting topic or anything. I was just kind of like, actually, I don't have a lot of intention. A lot of it's
Great
unconscious, in terms of the way that I'm going around things. I would like to actually know and see if there are any gaps that need to be filled or bridged, so that I can give myself that opportunity to say, I have success in this area because I do these things. Why don't I replicate that in a nuanced fashion for that area, for that area, for that area? Thankfully, there was commonality around each of the areas, but there were some tweaks that were required where I thought that could be better or that could be worse, depending on what it is, but just that ability to have that conversation with yourself is so. You'd mentioned something earlier, like most of us don't give ourselves that opportunity to even sit and say, what type and style of impact do I want to create? What am I capable of, and what am I going to do about it? And it's just those little incremental things that we could do to give ourselves more clarity as to where things stand right now and what the delta is, if any, between what we want to be or who we want to act as.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's natural, right? We get, especially when we're talking about our work and how it impacts our life and the way we behave in and out of work. We get on this hamster wheel, right? We get on this hamster wheel, or this treadmill, maybe is probably a better way to frame it, that it's going to keep churning. And every time that paycheck comes, we take care of our bills and obligations, and then let's do it all over again. And we end up being just so heads down, we don't take the time, and it's totally understandable because it's called life, but we don't take the time to have that bit of self-reflection to wonder, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I having the impact that I am capable of having? Whatever those questions are for you, I think that's different for everybody, but we must ask the questions to identify, as you say, to close those gaps. And, I don't mean to sound woo woo or, two rainbows and unicorns, because I'm not perfect at it. I'm not even close to perfect at it, but at least now I've got this set of standards. If I'm committed to those standards, I know I won't win everything. I'm going to stumble. I'm going to err. But I've created this bar, or these series of bars for myself, that I recognize there's always tomorrow another opportunity to try to get better at it. And then when you see others kind of clasp onto them as well, it makes it so ingrained in almost everything that you do, not only because you don't want to disappoint yourself by holding yourself to those standards, is now you don't want to be a hypocrite because you're the one evangelizing those standards. So it's even more of a thing for me now. And I think anybody who is kind of courageous enough to develop their own standards, whether it's the 10 W's or whatever you want them to be, whether it's sitting in a car and putting it in an Excel sheet, share them with others, and ask them to challenge you whether or not you're holding yourself accountable to them or you're delivering on it. And because that's ultimately what we want to do, is surround ourselves with people that are going to help us be our best. Well, they can't help you be your best if you haven't even identified the behaviors that will kind of illustrate or show that you're being your best.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier being the leader being the product of the environment, and your leadership style for the first 2/3 of your career was different to what it was, in the latter stages of your corporate career. And I really genuinely believe that to be the case, not as a convenient excuse or anything. Like, why would you not model successful behavior, successful being maybe in inverted commas, behavior, to give yourselves the types and styles of results that you think are the most important to you as you're building? And I think there's absolutely a lot to be said for that. So before we get to the W's, the 10 W's in and of themselves, one of the things I was thinking about was, I mean, I'll ask the question and I'll provide the context, Kyle. Why we and not I?
Mm,
That's the question. So, and the reason that I think I know I could tell you that my answer to that, and it might be congruent with what it is you're going to say. I'm not 100% sure, but as you're cascading it, that there could be that opportunity, a possibility where the recipient or the participant, maybe is a better word to
mhm,
use, then says, you can change, and it could be interchangeable. It could be I or we, and I will lead by example. I will do the right thing always. Those sorts of things,
mhm,
and it then becomes, there's more ownership, there's more autonomy, there's more personal directiveness in there, the ability to be able to take that and actually personalize it, make it their own.
mhm.
So I'm really, really interested why you went for we, and has there ever been an I type iteration?
What a brilliant question. And I would have answered it very differently when I created the principles. And here's my prevailing thought on it today. There really cannot be a we without an I first. And that sounds so elementary and kind of cliche or silly, but here's what I mean by that. I can't focus on us, the collective, the team. I can't focus on that if I haven't first identified who I am, what I bring to the table, the things that I know that I'm good at versus the things that my blind spots, the things that I know that I'm not good at. And then there's a whole other list of things that I don't even know that I'm not good at because I haven't encountered them yet.
Yeah.
So we have to, and we've talked about it for the last several minutes, is that you have to go through this period of self-reflection, and it's not a one-time thing. If we're lucky, it's as you know, because we
Yeah.
talked about this earlier with some of your personal development discipline, which is really impressive. You have to go through this period or this ongoing effort, at least, of identifying what you bring to the table, what you don't bring to the table. And the reason why I think that's important as a leader or as a member of a team is it should be our goal to augment our shortcomings, our blind spots, the things that we don't know yet, whether we're ignorant to it or we're not good at it. That's what a team is we augment each other's strengths and weaknesses. So, and I can't, if you and I are on a team together, or I'm the leader of the team that you're on, I can't possibly help you close those gaps and get better at the things that you have identified as gaps. I can't help you if I don't know what they are.
Yeah.
And as a leader, it's not just my obligation to get results out of you. I believe it's an obligation to help people grow and develop and take on more, even if that means leaving the team. So there must be an I component before we identify how I personally fit into this we. Now, the reason I jumped straight to we is because I was about to stand, and this is the truth, man. I was about to stand in front of 40 or 50 leaders in less than 12 hours. And I was terrified. I didn't know what I was going to say. I didn't know what this better way was. But I did know if I could get people to just change this paradigm of, and what's the paradigm I lived with for the previous 20 years, that for me to win, someone else had to lose. It
Mhm.
wasn't a matter of just leading and delivering great results. I also had to look better than my peers. I had to endear myself to my boss because that was usually the person, he or she was responsible for my next promotion. So it was this competitive kind of almost Lord of the Flies uh, paradigm that I carried with me. And I don't think I was alone with that in that approach. I don't even think that I think it is the majority of how of people's approach to their work. At least that's my experience and to what I was exposed. So I felt as if that evening, as I'm typing away, trying to put together a PowerPoint for this group the next day, because you can't have a good meeting without a PowerPoint. So
100%.
right. So I just it was very natural. There was no kind of muse on my shoulder. It's like, here's what we need to do to ensure that kind of self-serving ulterior motive driven paradigm would not be who we are. And it was that evening that I committed to myself that I was not going to be that person any longer. And I thought, well, if I can just hold myself accountable to these things and my team this group of people who don't know me, if they see me do this over and over again, not only are they behaving, I think by definition, they're going to be behaving in a way that's consistent with the way that I'm modeling these 10 principles. By definition, we are doing this together. It's not, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
So I felt as if I had to be really kind of overt and lean into this notion that and by the way, it's worth mentioning, it was very clear to me that there were really, really hardworking, in many cases, brilliant, committed, dedicated people doing what they did. But I also sensed there was a bit of silos. There were a number of silos around the organization, and with a team that size, that can be very, very bad. So I recognized if I could get them to kind of shed this paradigm that I had been exposed to for so many years and perpetuated, and recognize that there was an opportunity for us to be excellent across a much bigger waterfront than individual pockets or functional areas, you now connect some dots that had not been previously connected. And we all want to be or feel as if we're part of something bigger than what we do every day. Well, then it was my responsibility to make sure people were connected to one another. Those silos will be brought down and they can feel that they're part of something bigger than themselves, which it worked and continues to work. And at this point, we've sold north of 50,000 copies of my book. I've worked with dozens of organizations to help them implement these principles. And I've seen it work over and over again. And today, it's not a matter of do they work? It's a matter of how committed are you to them and infusing them and kind of weaving them into how you lead and how you are a member of a team.
Incredible. Congratulations on your success thus far.
Oh, thank you.
In terms of that. So let's go through the list of 10 here. If I'm assuming you can recount them, off memory.
Sure. Yeah. And I'll give the Reader's Digest version, which that expression dates me, but I'll fly through them. The first is the most fundamental. It's without this, everything else is a house of cards. We do the right thing, period. Always, period. And of course, we all enter our work lives and everything that we do with this, we do the right thing. It's so simple. It's by the way, every one of these principles is simple, but in collection, living them every day when things are not easy, especially when we're facing adversity or our results are not where we want them to be. It's simple, but not easy.
Yeah.
So we're going to do the right thing. We're going to approach every scenario. Like, we're not going to cut corners. We're not going to turn a cheek when things are off the rails. Like, we're going to do the right thing. But if I'm committed to doing the right thing, I can't just talk about it. That it rolls right into number 2. We lead by example. Again, super simple. But I think the question a lot of us tend to ask is, am I leading by example? Like, that's what we always heard kind of growing up. Lead by example. Well, the question to ask is, am I leading by an example that I would be proud if it were replicated? Yeah. And that's kind of my exercise of calling into those conference calls I mentioned earlier. It's when I'm out of the room is how are people behaving when it's a one-on-one that I'm not a part of? Are people still behaving in a way that they should be proud of or could be proud of? So we got to lead by example in everything that we do. If I'm going to be committed to leading by example, I've got to make good on my commitments. And that's where number 3 comes in. We say what we're going to do, and then we do it. And nearly every job, well, not nearly every job is responsible for delivering something to someone, a product or a service, whatever it is. And when we make a commitment to those that we serve externally, it should not be a question mark whether or not it's going to be delivered. But that same mentality must exist behind the curtain with the team. And it's one of the things that would drive me crazy in corporate life is we get in a meeting and someone commits to deliver something, and I'll have it for the next meeting. We get to the next meeting and the commitment was not delivered. We actually forgot about the ask, or we weren't clear enough to know that it won't be ready next week. It'll be the week after that. Like, we're not really specific on what happens next. We have to have that same discipline behind the scenes, because my failure to deliver something to you certainly has a downstream effect, and likewise. But it's really important for leaders, because a member of a team, when they don't do something that they've committed to do, well, the outcome or the blowback, the consequences of that can be very severe. As a leader, there's really not that same level of consequence. If I tell you, Gary, I'm going to research this, you come to me, you said you need some training on platform XYZ. Okay, my responsibility to look into that platform for you. If I don't get back to you, there's no consequence. But if I say to you, hey, we say what we're going to do and then we do it, you're now obliged. You're not allowed. You're obliged. You must come back to me and say, Kyle, we say what we're going to do and then we do it.
Yeah.
So making good on our commitments is just massive behind the scenes. If we're not good behind the scenes, our customers feel it. When we're high functioning and take care of each other behind the scenes, I think they feel it just as much, if not more. For us to deliver on our commitments, we number 4 must be in the back of our minds. We take action, and that's every organization, every team, regardless if it's at the workplace, has an opportunity to take on something that we've been avoiding. Every member of every team is aware of an opportunity to do something better, but we're usually mired in the way we've always done it. Well, not on this team. Not when we're trying to find excellence and create excellence and sustain it. We are going to take action, and that may mean that doesn't mean we're going to just we're going to death by 1,000 paper cuts. We're going to identify what matters most, but we're going to certainly, if there's something that's broken or an opportunity to be refined or just improved, we're going to recognize that that's out there. We're going to take action. It might go on a list somewhere, but we're not going to turn a cheek to it.
Yeah.
If we want members of the team, including the leader, to take action, you got to be prepared for the next we, and that's we own our mistakes. No one's going to raise their hand to point out a gnarly problem if they think there's going to be consequences if they take on that problem and stumble, right? If we're going to take on, by definition, things that have been long, kind of like lingering issues or really gnarly problems, by definition, we're not going to get it right all the time. But we have to create this environment where people recognize something's broken, recognize that there might be an opportunity to be better at it or optimize it, but also recognize that we're not going to bat 1,000. And if we want people to own their mistakes, I'll keep going. We have to lean into the next we number 6. We pick each other up. It's such a fundamental human exercise that for whatever reason, probably lots of reasons, but none of them good in my mind, we lose that bit of humanity when we enter the workplace. This dog eat dog, as I mentioned, for me to win, someone else must lose mentality kind of compels us to put these blinders on. Now, it's not the rule, and there are exceptions, but for the most part, we just lose that bit of connection and that bit of humanity. The leader has a secondary obligation with this principle, though, Gary. You have to lift people to new heights. It's not enough just to pick someone up when they're down, but we have to lift people to new heights. So if a member of my team has expressed a desire to take my job, I'm going to give them shadowing opportunities. I'm going to show them the good, bad, the ugly. If someone's expressed a desire to leave the team because they want to go do something else that's more appropriate for their path, I'm going to help that as well. Because when someone recognizes that you're in it for them and not for the results they can deliver, do you think they work less hard? Of course not. They see you're committed to them. They're going to be committed to you for the little bit of time you have. And they're going to leave anyway. They've already made up their mind. They want to do something else. I just think if we're leading in a way that is authentic and sincere in our desire to help move someone to a place that's going to better them, better their family life, better whatever it is they're trying or enable something they're trying to accomplish, that's a human obligation. So we pick each other up as not negotiable, and it's something that we should exercise in nearly every single conversation. We turn the corner to we number 7. It becomes a little tougher for leaders to embrace, which is where kind of the fracture starts to be noticed in kind of embrace deeper in the organization, because leaders a lot of times don't follow these next 3. We number 7 is we measure ourselves by outcomes, not activity. And it's one of the things that still drives me crazy in a lot of organizations, those that I was a part of and now those that I work with, is this fascination with busyness. And it's manifested usually in our calendars. It's the series of meetings, either recurring or one-off meetings that take us away from the real work, adding value, delivering really great outcomes to those we serve. I like to say I'm so happy that my Uber driver puts gas in the car before he or she picks me up, but I'm really paying for them to get me to the destination. The activity is incredibly important. I'm not minimizing or vilifying activity. We must engage in activity. But if we can't draw a straight line from the activity in which we are engaged to an outcome that we've been assigned or something that we know is part of our responsibility with the job that we have, it should be scrutinized. Why are we in this meeting? What are the outcomes we're here to identify and chase? And if that hasn't been clearly identified, then what are we doing? Why are we here? So let's focus on the outcomes. My favorite of all the principles, but by far the toughest to model every single day, is we number 8. It's we challenge each other. And there's a one-word second sentence. It's diplomatically. Challenges are fuel for growth. You know this, brother. Fuel for growth, not just in our personal lives, but especially in our work lives. If we're not in an environment where Peers are not allowed, but they must challenge other peers. Then we are settling for mediocrity. And it's not enough for one person, the boss, to be the only person to allow and be allowed to challenge others. The math doesn't work. It's one versus many. If we're going to be excellent, that means all of us have to contribute. That means when someone's not pulling their weight, we challenge them diplomatically. Now, challenges must be grounded in either data or experience. It can't be your opinion, because there's a crude cliche that follows. We all have opinions. That doesn't move the needle. Yeah. But if I have experience in a domain that we're starting to head down a bad path or make a mistake, I got to throw my hand up and say, boss, we challenge each other, right? Well, I've been here, I've done this, and I'm telling you, this is a bad recipe. Or if I've got data that says, I was with another organization, we launched this marketing campaign and our approach was very similar to what we did back there and it failed miserably. Well, we got to listen to that data. We have to get the best idea on the table. A lot of bosses have a hard time with this because they see it as a threat to their authority. And that's ego driven, right? So when we can sit back and be open to challenge, we send a lot of messages, but the biggest of those messages is, I care about your input. Your voice is valued here. And there's no way I have all the right answers as a leader. And I value your input. I need your input. And it works for peer to peer. And it absolutely has to continue up the change. That leader must be committed to challenging up instead of just taking orders. Nobody wants to be in that environment. Yeah. We can't have we number 8 without we number 9. That's we embrace challenge. Whether it's from the challenges that are initiated from the scenarios I just laid out, or whether they're external challenges, market pressure, whatever the scenario is, we're not going to wilt. We're just not. We're not going to look the other way. We're going to lock arms and we're going to be galvanized by it. And we're going to tell each other, man, this sucks. I'm really nervous about this. I don't know how we're going to get through this, but we embrace challenge, right? And there's a community or a sense of community that comes together or comes about when we look these challenges in the eye and say, man, this sucks. Or I don't know if this is going to work out, but I am committed to it because I'm a part of this team and we are committed to excellence, and I'm going to lock arms and we're going to move. The last principle is we number 10. And it is, I was intentional to leave it as we number 10, because I think if it's earlier in the 10, it becomes a distraction and kind of a recipe for chaos. And that's, we obsess over details. And this is all about excellence. It's about separating ourselves from those that do the same work that we do, not just on the macro scale, the product or service we deliver, but me as a leader. It's how I separate myself from the leader down the street. You as a member of the team, your obsession with details, especially if a consumer, someone that is paying hard-earned dollar to buy our product or service, we must obsess over those details. I mean, as a consumer, when we buy something, say from Amazon, and we open the package and you unfold the instructions and there's like typos and misspellings and it's just impossible to follow, right? That sends a message about how obsessed with the details that company was. And another way of saying is, how obsessed are they with your experience with the product or service that you just bought? Yeah. And that little bit of obsession can often be the difference between making that sale, kind of winning that client, keeping a member of the team on the team, and not. Now, if you juxtapose that experience with, say, opening a product from Apple, the word unboxing didn't even exist pre-Apple. They got these sexy little green stickers that you slowly pull off. It's like a magical experience. And that all but ensures the package inside the box is going to be magical as well. But it's that level of obsession with those details, the entire experience, that tells the consumer we care just a little bit more about the competitor than the competitor. And I think if we behave that way and kind of keep that in all things that we do, not perfection, but we are going to be obsessed with the details. And sometimes that will land in perfection. Often it won't. But we're not going to approach anything half-assed or as if mediocrity is even an option. Those are the 10 we's.
Brilliant examples provided as well there, especially the last one in terms of, obsessing over the details. And I have experiences like that. And I've also had, what could you say, almost challenging conversations with people saying, that doesn't matter, but it does, because I've had those experiences where there's a typo or there's something. And in this day and age, there is zero need for that to happen. With all the AI tools out there, you could say, take this and make it pristine, and it will do it in 0.01 seconds, and you have it, and then you have your instructions and such like that. And then the analogy, or the comparative analogy of the Apple product, whether you're an Apple fan or not,
Right.
that experience is, from any product that I've like, I'm all Apple, so any
Same.
product that I get, it's an experience. It's not where you're just ripping stuff off. You're actually paying attention to what you're doing,
Yeah.
and you're kind of saying, well, that's kind of cool. That's and you can
Yeah.
actually almost replicate it again. It's not as if you've just destroyed the whole
Yeah.
thing. You could
Yeah.
have that experience almost again, apart from maybe peeling off the
Yeah.
stickers and such like that. And some customers may pay no mind to that and no
Right.
attention. But then it becomes that obsession of knowing and understanding what type and style of community there is you're trying to serve. And in the first place, to be able to say, these are the types that do care about that, and we care about that, and we're going to show and demonstrate that we care about that. And if/when we make an error of quality or of anticipation or judgment in terms of how we're delivering that product, service, or result, we're going to course correct it in a visible enough way that client knows that they've helped make us better, and we're going to give them an even better experience the next time. So that it becomes this collaborative journey as you're moving forward. So what would you say from your perspective? I was really glad when you said, when you got to kind of 7, 8, 9, you're in that situation where organizations are kind of like, oh, this is the kind of hard stuff. This is the thing that might slow us down a wee bit or derail our progress. But from a personal perspective, Kyle, what would you say, as we sit here today, would be the one that you struggle with personally the most?
Oh, wow. I usually get the question, which one has helped me the most? Which one do I struggle with the most? Ironically, we number 10. We obsess over details. And I think members of teams that I was a part of for years would not agree with that. I developed a nickname, at least the only nickname that my teams were comfortable sharing, was the shredder. They would send me a document that would go, I don't know, to the board or my boss or a client, and I would shred it. It's like the font on this page doesn't match the font on this page. The margin on this page doesn't match this margin.
Yeah.
And they would say, you got to take it to, you're going to take it to the shredder. All right, get ready for some rework. But you know how over time my rework, or the rework that was required, got less and less and less frequent. So it drove change. In my personal life, I'm this guy that is, look, man, I'm about as ADD as it comes. Clinically diagnosed, by the way, not my opinion. And we can opine on whether or not how much that does or does not impact how I approach every single day. But what I find, whether that diagnosis occurred or not, what I find myself doing is going a mile wide and an inch deep on things, where I almost intuitively, or naturally rather, move on to something else very, very quickly. And because I do that, my obsession with details on the thing that I just left is compromised. And you know this as a small business owner as well. We wear a lot of hats, so it's. I'm not making excuses, but I absolutely find myself flying through things where I need to press pause and go, slow down, man. Just take a breath. And I remind myself of that, but it doesn't stop me from making silly errors more often than I'm proud of.
Yeah, I think even just having that conscious awareness to
That's
say,
it,
in an ideal world, I am operating at a 9.5 or a 10 on this, but right now needs must, and I'm okay doing an 8 for this particular time. And if there is any blowback as it relates to that 8, I can talk to that to say, yep, I could see why that would be an issue. Let me tell you exactly what's happening, or even better, proactively have a conversation to say, this one we have to go and adjust good enough, because I know a fact that my 8 is actually probably a 9 or a 10 for most other organizations anyway. I'm not giving myself a pass or self-justifying. I'm just explaining exactly what's happening, and also explaining it as in, this is an anomaly or an anomalous situation right now. That's not the norm. That's not how we're going to operate.
Well said. Well said. And context matters, right? And this, a question I get after keynotes or in a one-on-one environment is, how do you know how much to obsess
Yeah.
on whatever topic or activity you're on. And I can't, of course, I can't answer that question. Only you can answer that question. But I try to install a filter that is it going to be public facing? In other words, are my clients going to see this? Is it a marketing thing? Whatever. Versus, is it something that I'm doing behind the scenes that I'm the one that's going to have to like pick up the pieces because I didn't obsess over the right level of details? But my filter, I try to make sure that is, if it's going to leave this domain and someone else is going to see it, my level of obsession is immediately triggered. Now, again,
Yeah.
I'm still making mistakes, but we all have to decide, right? Is this juice worth that squeeze? Am I spending an hour on an email that I could do in 60 seconds? Yeah, it might not be written perfectly. However, the point is communicated and the receiving end is going to understand what I'm trying to accomplish. Okay, that's probably fine. But if I'm sending an email to a client, it better be right. It's
Yeah.
got to be right. And if it's not right, then I'm going to do what? I'm going to own that mistake, tell them we own our mistakes. It's not going to happen again. I just believe everybody is much more understanding of mistakes. If, matter of fact, I don't think people even judge us by our mistakes. I think they're more apt to judge us if we how quickly we remedy the mistake. And if it ever happens again, people are going to err, they're going to make mistakes, but let's own it and fix it.
100%. Absolutely. Kyle, as you know, this is called the Best You
Yeah.
podcast, and I like to take an opportunity to ask every guest, what's one regular practice that Kyle employs to give him the best opportunity to be the best version of himself each and every day?
Yeah, I think you can relate to this one too, man. It's fitness. I just got to be active. And it doesn't mean that I'm throwing a bunch of heavy weights around or doing anything crazy. Sometimes I'll just walk on a treadmill for an hour. I do that most days. It's kind of a way it's kind of cathartic for me in many ways, and I know you will agree with this. If I skip or I don't give it my all that day, whatever that might mean, it could be a quick 30-minute thing, could be an hour thing, could be 2 hours. If I don't do it, the rest of my day is not the same. My wife could tell you whether or not I've worked out by midday or what, by my behavior. If she knows if I haven't gotten my workout because I work out early in the morning.
Yeah.
I just like to sweat. I just like to be active, and I think it plays such an underestimated role in our overall psychological well-being, not just physical, but psychological well-being. It fuels me through the rest of the day usually.
Absolutely. I
know you
love
agree. I think you agree with those things based on as active as
100%.
you
I
are.
agree. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It has to be part of the day. Everything else is compounding on top of that.
That's it.
And sometimes the workout for me, depending on the schedule, it might be later at night. Then I have this anticipation as the day goes on to say I'm going to get the sweat on a little bit later, and then I'm excited to get that. So everything, the energy's still there. I don't need that physicality to generate the energy as long as I know that it's coming. And I completely, absolutely concur with that. At the time of recording, I think I'm on day 65 of doing a 5K run every single day. And it wasn't even intentional. It was a thing where I used to do one day on, one day off. And then the day off, I would do a biking exercise or maybe a hike on the treadmill or something like that. And I think my schedule, I said, right, well, what I'll do is I'll just do 2 in a row here because I'm going to have to miss a run. There was some scheduling thing. I don't even remember what it was. I should probably have a better story for this. And then I did the 2 in a row and I thought, you know what, I'll get back on the regular schedule. I'll just do the 3rd one and then everything's fine and then no harm, no foul. And then I just kept doing it. And it's just the amount of processing, the amount of flushing out, the amount of bringing in positivity, and not to mention, of course, the physical benefits of it is just absolutely, absolutely incredible. And as I say, compounding on everything that we're doing.
Yeah. You know what? I hate to have this conversation without this caveat because I know you respect this based on, again, how active you are. This does not mean you are super excited about doing it every day, right? There are days you don't want to do it. Yeah. There are days, right? That's the point here is there's this fallacy that people that are committed or disciplined in whatever it is that they're disciplined or routine driven related. Like for me, it's fitness. For you, now you got this streak going. You don't wake up and run, no pun intended, to that run. You don't. You just don't. There are days you just don't want to do it. And the value of doing it is exponentially greater than the physical outcome, because you've now overcome something.
Yes.
Which fuels the rest of the day, that maybe the rest of the week, depending. So I always want to add that, because you're obviously in great shape. I try to be in decent shape, and I'm not naive that people hear these conversations and they're like, well, it's easy for. No, it's not. It sucks, man. There are days I just don't want to do it, and some weeks it's more days of not wanting to do it than the days that I really do want to do it.
Yeah.
But the satisfaction just compounds. It's really a cool thing. I bet it's going to take a massive hurdle for you to not keep this streak going for a long, long time.
I think it's going to be an injury, or some bizarro situation, because I could basically go do it anywhere, and in any city or any occasion or anything like that. And just to add on to what you were saying there, Kyle, I completely agree. And there are some days that are very, very difficult, and I'm like, why was that? Because everything was set up that this was going to be the best of the week, the month, maybe the quarter, and I just felt like I was dragging my arse from the very beginning to the very end. The question I ask myself afterwards, and ask anyone afterwards if they're kind of struggling with that motivation, is tell me the last workout that you regret. The last one that you sat down and said, I really wish I hadn't done that. That just was not good. And I'm not talking about if you've overdone it and you have an injury or you're really hurting or anything, but in general terms, tell me the last one you regret. And as you said, they're like, no, well, I don't actually regret any of them. Of course you don't. Of course you don't.
Gary, my spin on that is like, I'll come home from the gym or whatever. My wife will be like, how was the workout? Or how was this? Or I'll go, better than nothing.
Yes.
Better than nothing.
Yeah.
It is. It's better than nothing. And I have that sense of satisfaction. Maybe I didn't kill it just now, but it's better than nothing. And I have to take some pride in that, because tomorrow I can get back at it.
Definitely. In my earlier running days, I had an old treadmill in the basement, and I called my dad every day and I told him I'm running a mile every day on the treadmill, and he kind of laughed and scoffed a wee bit at it. And he's like, what's the point of that? And I says, well, I can go and do that for, I can't remember, like 7 minutes each day. And at the end of that, that's, 50 minutes of exercise that I would likely have just been sitting on the couch doing a whole bunch of nothing. And he wasn't doing that from a debilitating perspective or in any critical sort of way. He was just kind of like, it seems like a bit of nonsense, like it's a lot of effort just for a mile. And I said, well, there's a couple of reasons for that. One, I can't run any longer than that for right now because I've just started. And two, I'm kind of busy. And three, I want to see if I like it. And four, I want to see if it actually works over time. And then over time, he was, of course, he was my biggest fan and my biggest champion, and he was into it afterwards. But his initial reaction was, what? Why even bother? Anyway, that's another story for another day. Kyle, before I let you go, my friend, firstly, I want to say thank you very, very much for sharing all the information and wisdom that you have, and the 10 Bs are just absolutely incredible. Where can people find out more about you, more about your services, more about your book?
Yeah, well, Gary, likewise, man. Thank you for having me. I'm grateful for the conversation. Grateful getting to know you a bit. So the book, as you were kind enough to mention a number of times, is Begin With We: 10 Principles for Building and Sustaining a Culture of Excellence. It's on all platforms, audio, paperback, Kindle, whatever you like. It's out. My website is KyleMcDowellInc.com. All social media platform handles are essentially the same, at Kyle McDowell Inc. And I really value you asking that question a lot, man, because I don't use those social platforms for vanity things. Like I genuinely use them for interactions and connections from readers or people that attended a keynote. I do anywhere from 1 to 3 keynotes a month. I did one last week that was a virtual one at 20 countries from around the globe dialed in. It was so cool. So I use those as an opportunity to interact and meet with people and be challenged by people who don't necessarily think this is right or the approach for them. And I'm open to that as well. So that's how you find me. And I welcome the opportunity to engage.
Superb. Kyle, my friend, thank you very much. I was looking forward to this one. And of course, it delighted and did not absolutely in any way disappoint. Thank you very, very, very much for coming on the show.